Well, good afternoon. We're going to get started with your very special guest speaker. First of all, I'd like to welcome any members of our daily guests that are here today visiting on a little bit of a cloudy, dreary day, but the rain has let up a little bit. But very special welcome to all of our group from Cabot, Arkansas. So let's... You guys are always one of our best organized groups of the year, all in your color-coded shirts. And the organization from the parents and chaperones is something we wish we had every weekend. But certainly last weekend and this weekend, we've enjoyed having everyone from Cabot here. And do we have anyone from our family programs in this briefing? No, I think they were in the earlier one. So I think that's the extent. So again, welcome. This is a very special opportunity. There's only a few times a year that we have an astronaut guest speaker with us. And last weekend we had the great moon buggy competition going on. For the other half of Cabot saw that. But they did not get the treat that all of you are getting today. And that is a chance to hear from Air Force Captain Samantha Cristoforetti. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She finished up her secondary education in 1996. She spent 1 year as an exchange student here in the United States in St. Paul, Minnesota. And when she was up there, she had the opportunity 18 years ago, at the age of 18, to come here to our Space Academy Level 2, our high school program, and she went through our week-long program. In the technology track, she stayed in Habitat 1, so the building that a lot of you are staying in this week. And if any of you are staying in room 403, up on the 4th floor, that's the room that she stayed in. So, anyone in 403 this week? In this group? No? I don't think so. Maybe they were in the earlier one. So she is one of 4 Space Camp alumni to have come through as a youth. And a challenge to the guys, because all 4 are female that have come through our programs. 1 has flown already in space, Dottie Metcalf Lindenberger, and Samantha will be the second. She'll fly a year from December on a Russian rocket, as you'll see in her presentation, up to the International Space Station. In 2001, she graduated from university in Munich, Germany, with a master's degree in mechanical engineering with specializations in aerospace propulsion and as well as lightweight structures. She spent some time in Toulouse, France, working on an experimental project in aerodynamics, and she wrote her master's thesis in solid rocket propellants during a 10-month research stay in Moscow. She also completed training in 2005 from the Air Force Academy, where she served as a class leader and was awarded the Honor Sword for Best Academic Achievement. And from 2005 to 2006, she was based here in the United States in Texas at Sheppard Air Force Base doing joint NATO exercises. And then she was assigned to the 132nd Squadron, 51st Bomber Wing, based in Europe. She has more than 500 hours flying in 6 different types of military aircraft, one of which is the T-38, which you saw maybe underneath our space shuttle, which is being reassembled to be put on display, as well as a T-37, an SF-260, an MB-339A, an MB-339CD, and an AMX. In May of 2009, she was selected by the European Space Agency to join the astronaut corps, and in November 2010, she completed her training. She's currently assigned to a training program covering the Russian Soyuz spacecraft, the systems aboard the International Space Station, robotics, as well as training for an extravehicular activity, otherwise known as a spacewalk or an EVA. And she's assigned to the Expedition 4243 flight crew, which I mentioned earlier will launch in December of 2014. When she's not training to go into space, she enjoys hiking, scuba diving, practicing yoga, reading, traveling. Her other interests include technology, nutrition, as well as the Chinese language. So please welcome our Space Camp alumni member and Air Force captain and soon-to-be astronaut aboard the International Space Station, Samantha Cristoforetti.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I suppose you all have had lunch, right? So in spite of having had lunch, it's very bad. You're going to make me very sad if you fall asleep on me. So I'm going to make my best to not make you fall asleep, but bear with me. I know after lunch it's a little bit difficult. So as Mike said, and thank you again for the really nice introduction, I was one of you about 18 years ago. So I very much remember taking really nice pictures under the space shuttle, as you might have had if the rain let you. Again, I was an exchange student up in Minnesota. I learned by chance about Space Camp, and I really, really wanted to come. And I was lucky enough that my family and my host family all supported me, and I was able to come here. And to maybe like some of you, I came here with this big, big, big dream that I had had since I was very small, since I was a child, a younger child, of one day going to space. And believe it or not, it's been 18 years, but in roughly a year and a half, I will have a chance, if everything goes well, to actually fulfill this dream and travel to space. And it's going to look somewhat like this. I'm going to travel to space on board of a Russian Soyuz rocket from a cosmodrome, which is in a pretty far away place. It's called, in a country called Kazakhstan. The cosmodrome is called Baikonur. And I want you to take a look at that rocket, make a little bit of a mental picture of it, because I want to show you another rocket, which launched from the same place in 1961, over 50 years ago, half a century. And as you can see, do they look very different? Pretty similar. This rocket brought to space this guy, whom you might have heard of, Yuri Gagarin, the first human being ever to travel to space. And he came back in this capsule, which is in a museum over in Moscow right now. I had the chance of visiting it. And again, look at this capsule. Is this one very different? And this is the capsule that I will be coming back in a couple of years when I return from space. So you might get the impression that nothing has changed. In 50 years, we're kind of doing the same thing, and not much has changed, has evolved. But actually, it's not true at all. We do things in space nowadays that were totally and completely unimaginable 50 years ago. And I will show you some of those. But the thing that I really want to talk to you about now that was totally unimaginable 50 years ago was something like this. This is my crew that I will fly to space with. The guy in the center is our commander, a Russian cosmonaut, Anton Shkaplerov. On your right is Terry Wirtz, a NASA astronaut and colonel in the US Air Force. And then on your left, of course, it's myself. So an international crew of a European, an American, and a Russian. 50 years ago, it was all about competition, and it was about the space race, who's going to get there first, and we're going to beat them. Now, it's all about collaboration and cooperation. In space, we do things together, because by doing things together and pulling our resources together, and our talents, and our skills, and our money, of course, we get to do things that none of us would be able to do on our own. So it gets more exciting, and we get to progress and do more interesting things. So I myself, I'm from the European Space Agency, and we are, in ourselves, a little bit of that as well, because we are, the European Space Agency is put together by many European countries that all contribute a little bit to the space program and to what we do in space. And this is the entrance of our training facilities in Cologne, over in Germany. And here you can see the flags of the countries that participate in the space program from the European side. So this is a picture of the country I'm from. Do you guys recognize it by any chance? Anybody? Yeah, exactly. I'm told it is one of the easiest places to recognize from space because it has this very, very distinct boot shape. So I'm from there, and it's obviously a picture taken from space. As you can see up there, this is one of the Soyuz capsules that I will talk to you more about. So back to this launch. This is, again, the Soyuz rocket launching from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. This is a day launch. I don't know myself whether my launch is going to be a night or a day one. I think night launches are really spectacular, so I'm kind of crossing my fingers. This is kind of the same system as the Saturn V. Have you guys seen the Saturn V out there in the museum? Okay. This guy is a fraction of the size of the Saturn V. The Saturn V is huge. This is a little brother, a little sister, much smaller. But the principle is the same. Most of the rocket is actually made of fuel. And as we use that fuel, we kind of get rid of that part, of that stage, stage by stage. We get rid of the whole thing. And the only thing that actually gets to space is a tiny capsule that is only in the top part. You know, the orange, and then above there is that kind of brownish, and then on top there is the white part. The capsule where the astronauts are in is only this tiny piece on top. And this is the way it looks once you get to space. So it used to take, up to very recently, a couple of days to get to the final destination. And the space that you have in there is roughly like the space of a car. And I'm not talking about your huge American cars. I mean, I'm talking about our tiny European cars, so much smaller. Now we're learning to do it a little bit faster. The last crew that departed actually arrived in 4 orbits, or 6 hours. So we go around the Earth in 90 minutes, an hour and a half. So now we're able in 4 orbits, so about 6 hours, to get to final destination. So a little bit more comfortable for the astronauts. Here you can see those 2 dishes are like 2 antennas, and there are more. And thanks to those antennas, this capsule, which is also called Soyuz, by the way, is able to orient itself to destination and do what we call a rendezvous. So imagine you're like, for a couple of days, now 6 hours, in this emptiness of space. There's nothing. And then all of a sudden, from this periscope that the Soyuz has, you can see it's that green thing sticking out of the top. It's kind of like a ship periscope. In this middle of nowhere, you can all of a sudden find this little tiny spot of light that becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it gets contours, and you start to recognize your destination. And you know what the destination is? Where are we going to? Just shoot it out. Come on. A space station, exactly. This is it. So after 2 days or 6 hours, whatever it's going to take, of flying through nothing in this little tiny space, like a little European car, you see this light and this contour. It becomes bigger and bigger, and it becomes this. And this, to me, is amazing, because it means that as human beings, we have an outpost in space. It's not like it used to be that we go to orbit and then come back, or we would go to the moon and come back. We go out there because it's part of our home, and we go there to stay. So raise your hand, please, if you were born in the year 2000 or after. Okay, almost all of you. So realize, you can put your hands down. Realize that you have not known one single day in which there has not been a human being on orbit on the International Space Station. Every single day that you have been alive, one fellow human being of yours was up there. I think this is amazing, because it means that for the last 13 years now, we have officially been, as human beings, a spacefaring species. We are not anymore completely bound to our home planet, and we have learned how to permanently live on orbit. So, anybody knows about the size of the space station? More or less? How big is it? Like what? A football field, exactly. That's more or less how big it is. And you guys know what those things on the side are? Solar panels, exactly. So we're completely green on station. No pollution. We get everything from solar energy. And then you have this, this structure that we call it truss, that holds the solar panel kind of out of the way. And then you have this, show you in the next picture. Then you have this part, it goes kind of like this from this. Hey, do you see what's this thing on the top? Do you recognize it from the belly up? What is it? Just shoot it out. The space shuttle, yeah. This is a very neat picture, because this was the last time that the space shuttle was docked, and we had a chance of taking a photo shooting of that moment, because we had a Soyuz undocking, and it was able to capture this moment. It was about a couple of years ago in summer. So from there where the space shuttle is, down where this other vehicle with this cross of solar panels, that's a European vehicle, a European cargo vehicle. This is a series of cylindrical modules in which the astronauts can live and work and breathe and sleep and float around. We call them pressurized modules, because that's where we have air inside, kind of like the air we breathe here. More or less the same composition, more or less the same pressure, so human beings can live in there. And we have Russian side, which is more like on the bottom right side of your screen. And then on the top left side of your screen, we have more like the American, Japanese, and European side of the space station. So you recognize those? I've shown them you before. Those are the Soyuz capsules that we use to bring the crews on board. So as I told you, as I've shown you my crew, which is made of 3 people. So every one of the Soyuzes can carry 3 people on board. And the way we do it is when we show up in December 2014, there's going to be 3 people already on board who are going to leave a few months afterwards, and 3 new people are going to come. Can you imagine why we do it that way? What would happen if people show up and all of them are new? It would be difficult, right? Because you show up and you don't know where things are, and you're kind of new, and they've trained you, but you're not really sure. And then somebody might have misplaced something, and you don't know who to ask. So we do this. So we have like a continuous. It's like you have a continuous handover between teams. You always have veterans on board, and then new ones coming, and the veterans can teach you, and then they leave, and you become the veteran, and you can teach to the new one. So I really like this principle because it means you always have a chance to learn from people who know more than you do. But then, after a few months, those people leave, and then it's your turn to give back everything that you have learned to those new people. And there is a continuous passing of information and skills and experience from one crew to the next. And of course, if you have 6 people on board, you always want to have those 2 Soyuzes, those 2 capsules, docked to the space station because those are also our lifeboats. If something bad happened to the space station and all of a sudden we have to leave, we need to be able to jump into our spaceships and leave. And of course, that's not as easy as I'm making it sound, but it's possible. So I would like to tell you about the 2 activities that are really very special and peculiar to the astronaut world. Those 2 things you can really do if you're an astronaut. And one of them is to fly the robotic arm on the space station. We actually have a couple of robotic manipulators on the space station. This big one is called the Canadarm2. It's like the big brother of the Canadarm that used to fly on the space shuttle. And then you have the smaller one that is the Japanese robotic arm. And we call it flying the arm from inside the space station. We have like workstations, and we have like joysticks, kind of like if you're flying a flight simulator on your computer. And we are able to manipulate and to move this robotic arm and to move stuff around. And this is actually how we built the space station over about 12 years. We've talked about it. It's about the size of a football field. Obviously, we could not launch it the way it is. So the way we did it, we progressively launched it module by module. And every time a new module arrived, the astronauts from inside the space station would use the robotic arm to grab this new module from the bay of the space shuttle and to attach it to the stack that was already there. And then most likely, some other astronauts would have to go out on a spacewalk and maybe make cable connections or make whatever configuration was necessary to permanently attach that module to the space station. And so over the course of many years, we've actually built this huge structure, which is now, as you said, the size of a football field. So this is the place where you actually fly the robotic arm. At the bottom, you can see the robotic workstation. And this is a pretty unique place. It's called Cupola, and it's basically made out of many windows. And it's a place where astronauts love to hang out, to look at the Earth flying by, and to take pictures. Lots of the pictures from the astronauts that we see posted on the internet are actually taken from the cupola. But the original reason why we built the cupola was to be able to fly the Canadarm, the robotic manipulator, and being able to see outside what was going on. So this is an example of a setup. This is Paolo Nespoli, an Italian astronaut who flew a couple of years ago with her crewmate Katie Coleman, and they're getting ready to do robotic operations in the cupola. And one of the things that you can do with the robotic arm is to grapple visiting vehicles. Does any one of you know this vehicle? Have you guys seen it? Yeah. Yeah, it's not a satellite, nope. It's a cargo vehicle that brings cargo to the space station, and it's flown a couple of times now. Nobody knows it? Dragon, exactly. That's SpaceX's Dragon. And it's very important. It's a new American vehicle. And it's given the space station a capability that the space station did not have after the shuttle retired, which is to bring back stuff, to bring back cargo. All the other cargo vehicles that go to station, the Russian Progress, the European ATV, the Japanese HTV, they're great to bring stuff up, but there is no way we can bring stuff down, because once they undock and they come back, they burn up in the atmosphere. Now, Dragon is capable to actually bring stuff back. We can recover it from the sea. And the really cool thing about it is that since it's capable of bringing stuff back, maybe one of these days in future years, it will also be able to bring astronauts back. And so it will be, besides the Russian Soyuz, another way of getting to the station and getting back from station. Another really cool thing that you can do when you fly the arm from the space station is to fly one of your bodies around. So can you see over there an astronaut? A spacewalking astronaut? So he's, I don't know if you can see it very well, but he's actually attached to the arm. So somebody from inside the station is flying the arm and actually flying him or her around. And it's a really neat job. It's a pretty complicated choreography. It's very important to have a good teamwork, to work together. The person inside and the person outside need to communicate, to talk to each other precisely, because it's a very delicate type of work. So spacewalking is the second thing that is very, very unique to the astronaut work. It's very unlikely that you'll do a spacewalk unless you're an astronaut. Actually, it's not even a given that you'll do a spacewalk if you are an astronaut, but we would all like to do one, because it's really cool. This is how we get out. We have a place which is called airlock. This is a very small module of the space station. We isolate it from the rest of the space station. We recover the air that's inside as much as we can, and then we open the hatch and we go outside. So by opening the hatch, we make the vacuum in the airlock, and then we go outside. So this is how it looks from the inside. Find the astronaut. This is how it looks from the outside, although I cannot promise that it's really the same person. So how do you train to do a spacewalk? Do you know? Anybody knows? Yeah? Yes, we do it underwater. And in the US in particular, we do it in this facility, which is an amazing facility. If you guys are ever to Houston, I really suggest, you're ever in Houston, I really suggest you go and see it. It's very close to Johnson Space Center, and they do organize visits. It's called Neutral Buoyancy Facility. It's a huge pool. It's about 40 feet deep. And when you're inside this pool, you're basically in space, because there is a replica, a real-size replica inside of the entire space station. And so when you're inside there, you really have this feeling that you're really crawling on the outside of the space station. And as you said, why do we do it underwater? We have this problem of simulating weightlessness. So gravity is one tricky thing. You cannot turn it off. There is no way of turning off gravity. There is also no way of screening it. We are stuck with gravity. We need to live with it. So how do you simulate weightlessness? We kind of do it underwater because we do it like scuba diver. You know how scuba divers, if they need to maybe watch a coral or something cool and they want to float above it, they regulate, they add or release air so that they kind of stay at the same level. They don't go up, they don't go down, they float at the same level. That's sort of kind of being weightless. That's what we do in the pool. We exploit this principle, and that allows us to float, to work in the 3 dimensions, and train us and prepare us for space. So I started going through this training about a year and a half ago. And again, in the astronaut world and I think in many other professions, it's all about learning for people who have done it before, from the veterans, the experienced people. So when I got to do my first training in the pool, I got to do it with Tracy Caldwell, who performed 3 spacewalks on her space flight about 3 years ago. And so she was able to give me advice and put me on the right path to qualify as a spacewalker myself. So this is the moment when I went underwater for the first time. And you can see divers over there who take charge of you once you go underwater. And I'm going to show you a little video of how that works. So here they're putting on the helmet. So they're basically putting the suit together while you put it on. You put your trousers on first, and then you sneak into the upper part. Then they put the helmet on, the gloves. And then they start
TV1, helmet's
pressurizing.
done and locked.
So they start like pumping extra air in the suit, so it pressurizes, it blows up a little bit like a balloon, and then it weighs about 200 pounds altogether, even probably
Copy
even
that,
a
no
little bit
alarms.
more. So you cannot walk in it. They lower you underwater with this crane, and then once you're underwater, you have all these safety divers who are in charge of you and of your safety especially, and they take hold of you. They bring you to the bottom of the pool, and then they start doing what we were talking about. They need to regulate the buoyancy. That's what they're doing now. They're adding and taking weights away. And then it's kind of funny. You can relax in this speed line because they need to find that sweet spot when your suit's going to be neutral. It's not going to be wanting to turn, to go up and down. And then you start your work. And you work in the pool like that for about 6 hours. That's the typical duration of an EVA, of an extravehicular activity or a spacewalk. It can even last a little bit more, but in the pool we're limited to 6 hours. And it's extremely demanding from a physical point of view, very exhausting, especially your hands get really tired. Imagine that every time you have to open or close a hook, you need to like squeeze very strongly a tennis ball. And you have to do that for 6 hours. That's going to be really hard. And the things that you basically spend 6 hours opening and closing hooks because it's really, really important during a spacewalk that everything is attached to structure. If you don't attach things, they're going to float away. And we definitely do not want any tools or any stuff to float away. And we, for sure, do not want any astronauts to float away and get lost in space. So we really stress this hooking everything to structure all the time. This is a Russian EVA, Russian colleagues doing a spacewalk. Very similar work, just a different spacesuit, as you can see. The training is very similar, and I had the chance to go through this Russian training. This is a picture of me on the left and my German colleague Alex on the right, just maybe 2-3 weeks ago. We got to have our first exposure to the Russian way of doing spacewalks, which is very similar, really. I mean, a different suit. Obviously, you do it on the Russian segment of the space station. The pool that they have is a little bit smaller, but in principle, a very similar way of doing spacewalks. All right, I want to bring you back to space. This is, again, the Soyuz capsule that is going to bring us to the station. And in particular, this is the moment when a Soyuz is coming to the station for docking. This probe sticking out is the docking probe, and is what allows us to make the mechanical connection to the space station and then pull the Soyuz in, and then eventually opening the hatch and let the crew come over from the Soyuz to the station. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how you live in space. I mean, some things are a little bit different, and they can be challenging. One thing is food. We cannot go out to the supermarket and get some food. We cannot have fresh food all the time because we don't know how to store it. We don't have refrigerators or freezers on board the space station for food. So we need food that is shelf stable, that can be conserved for a long time and still be healthy to eat. So one solution is like canned food. The Russians use that a lot. Another thing that is used a lot is dehydrated food. That means that we take the water out. And if we take the water out from food, it's going to stay stable. It's not going to go bad that quickly. So if we dehydrate the food before we eat it, we need to rehydrate it. We need to put water back in. And so we attach it to a water dispenser, and then you have the two buttons there, dispense hot or dispense ambient. You can choose the temperature. And you can also select the quantity of water you want to dispense. Typically, it's on the instructions. The package will tell you how much water you should put in. And then you let it rest for a while. And if it's really liquid, you will drink it out of the package. And if it's a little bit more solid and sticks to the spoon, you can cut the package open and just eat it out from the spoon. Another option is thermally stabilized food. Those are just in pouches. So basically, you put the food in pouches, you seal them, and then you expose them to high temperatures, so you kill all the germs, and then you never open it until the day when you eat it, so it's still going to be good for about 18 months. And in this little suitcase, you can heat it. So it's a little electric oven. You can put the package in, and then you close it, and you start it. And after about 15, 20 minutes, your food will be ready to be eaten. And then, of course, you might have the option of food which is just ready to be eaten that you don't need to heat. So this is Chris Hadfield, who's on station now, and he's having his dessert.
Chocolate pudding cake. Looks like it too. Not bad. Gonna be hard to eat. Gonna be messy. Very good.
You liked it? All right. Sometimes we do get fresh food on board of the space station. And when is that going to happen? After we got a resupply ship coming in. So for example, this is a picture still from Chris Hadfield from maybe a week ago, because just recently we had a Progress cargo ship coming on board. And usually people on the ground are nice enough to send some fresh food on board that you can eat in the first few days. This is astronaut Andre Kuipers, a European astronaut, who, as you can see, is really, really happy about getting some fresh oranges and fresh tomatoes. So you see, astronauts really like fresh food because it's tasty, because it's real food, because they know that it's really good for them. So they don't have access to fresh food all the time because they're in space. But you guys have no excuse whatsoever. So no packaged food, no junk food, no shelf food. You should really go to the supermarket and get yourself fresh food most of the time. So you keep yourself healthy, and you get to go to space when you grow up. All right, let's talk about what you do after eating. You might, it might get messy. You might get your hands dirty or something, and you might want to wash your hands. So liquids in space are a little bit tricky because they're going to float around. So we can see.
Okay, it's time to get clean. I'm going to squirt some water out. So we have a big ball of water, and you put it on your hand. And now I've got water floating around on my hand. And so I wash my hands up with that. And then grab a towel. And dry them off. So that's how we do it.
And it's a little bit, we make it easy for ourselves in space. It's a little bit of a special water that already contains some soap, and it's no rinse. So you can just do that, and it's going to actually clean your hands. And you can also have a lot of fun with water in space, if you're careful. All right, and some things, again, are tricky, like, washing your hair. We have, like, no-rinse shampoo that we can squirt some drops on it, and then with a towel, we can clean our hair. How about cutting hair? What's going to be the problem with a haircut? Can I just go with scissors and cut my hair? Why not? Huh? The hair will go everywhere, exactly. So how do we solve that? Vacuum, exactly. We have the razor connected to the vacuum cleaner. So you want to see a super high technology space vacuum cleaner? I don't think the space program is investing in vacuum cleaners that much, so we're stuck with this one. But it works. So it's actually, it's connected via this tube to the clippers.
Cutters. Clippers.
Clippers. Very convenient.
All right, just happy. Another thing we do on the space station for about 2 hours every day, absolutely mandatory, is exercise. And the reason we do that is because if we didn't do it, if we didn't exercise, imagine we're just floating around all day. Our body is not working. I'm not even working to, in space, I won't be even working to keep my head up. Or all this little work that your body does that you don't even realize that your body does, just to keep you standing upright or keeping your head upright, not to mention walking or running or lifting things. All of that in space you don't do because everything is weightless. So your brain is pretty smart and a little bit lazy. So it says, okay, if I don't really need all that muscle every day, all that bone, I'm just going to get rid of it because it costs energy to keep up body mass, to keep up muscles, to keep up bone. And so we need to work out every day for a couple of hours just to send a message to our brain that there is no need to get rid of muscle and bone, that we actually need it. And we do two types of exercise, cardiovascular, so for example running, but we also have a bike on board. And then we have this really cool machine which is called ARUD, and it allows you to do what you normally would do in a gym. Like for example, this astronaut here is doing a squat. You would normally do it in a gym using weights. You cannot just do it with weights in space because everything is weightless. And so you have this special machine that allows you to do the same and keep your bones and keep your muscles healthy. How about going to the toilet? Do you guys want to know how you go to the toilet? Yeah, I figured that.
Here we are
Sunny
at
Williams,
the throne.
commander of the space station
Awesome.
last year.
You might see the little, you might have noticed the little moon on the outside. This is our orbital outhouse right here. And of course, it serves for two functions. Number 2, right here. I'll show you. But you see it's pretty small, so you have to have pretty good aim, and you be ready to make sure things get let go the right direction. And it smells a little bit, so I'm closing it up. And that's, of course, for number 2. And this guy right here is for number 1. So they're sort of two slightly separate functions, but you can do a little, essentially both, by hanging on right here and doing number 1 and number 2. I might add it's color-coded so you really don't get it mixed up, which is nice. This is yellows for number 1. And of course, you do have your privacy. There's a little door, so other people know that you're in there.
All right. How about sleeping? Do you guys want to know what astronauts sleep in space? We actually have our own little sleeping station. They're like, well, I would like to say a phone booth, but you probably don't even know what a phone booth is, right? You're way too young for that. You do? Okay. About that size. And here you see Paolo Nespoli, Scott Kelly, and Katie Coleman sticking their heads out from their sleeping station. That was Christmas, I guess 2010. And the Russian cosmonauts had been really nice. They had brought over Christmas gifts for them because it was Christmas for them, but not for the Russians. The Russian Christmas is 2 weeks later, so I'm sure they returned the favor. So let's see Sunny again, showing the sleeping quarters or the sleeping stations. Oh, sorry. That was a preview. There you go.
Here's one sleep station right here. I'm going in right now. You can follow me if you want. So I'm inside. It's sort of like a little phone booth, but it's pretty comfy. I've got a sleeping bag right here that we sleep in so we don't have sort of like a little bit of a cover. We don't fly all over the place. I'm coming out. And just for reference, that's one sleep station. This one's another, right here. There's one on the ceiling, if you want to call it, right here. And then there's a fourth on the other wall over here. So all of us sleep in a little bit of a circle.
It's cool, huh? It's better than bunk beds. All right, and to finish up, I just want to give you some images, some flashes of what it looks like to train for the space station. It's a pretty long program. For a 6-month stay on the space station, there's a lot you have to learn. So it takes about, if you're a rookie like me, who has to learn everything from scratch, it's about 2.5 years of full-time training. And you do lots of different things. So I don't have the time to tell you all about it, but just a few flashes. One thing you do is to get exposure to weightlessness. And as I said, to do long hours of training, we use the pool. And that's not real weightlessness. It's kind of like a trick to simulate it a little bit. But what you can do to have real weightlessness for a little bit is to do parabolic flights. So you have these special airplanes, who will fly parabolas like this. They will fly in the sky like that. And every time they do a parabola, they will do about 30 in a flight. You have 22 seconds of weightlessness in which you're floating freely around the cabin. And it's pretty cool. Or you might find yourself in Russia in winter. It's pretty snowy and pretty cool. And with your crew, you need to survive for 2 hours using the survival kit that's in the Soyuz spacecraft. Because the Russians want to make sure that if one day you really have to come back in an emergency and there is not a rescue crew waiting for you, you're able to survive at least for a couple of days on your own until they get you. Or, of course, you might find yourself flying long, long hours of simulations in the simulator of the Soyuz spaceship. I'm going to be flight engineer on board of the Soyuz, so I have a responsibility of knowing my stuff very well, knowing the systems very well, and being able to assist the commander and work with him closely in case we have an emergency, something that breaks, something that goes wrong. And talking about things going wrong, this is one of the big emergency scenarios that we practice with for on the space station, which is a fire. And so you might find yourself in Houston in the big mock-ups of the space station, a little bit like those that we have here at Space Camp. And the trainers will simulate a fire for you. All of a sudden, there will be the simulated smoke all over the place, and you'll have to don your mask and run through your fire procedures. And all of this requires a lot of work from a lot of people. And the cool thing about the space program is that most people don't get there by chance. You know, most of us got into the space program because we caught the space bug at some point, and we're really passionate about space, and we do it with a lot of dedication. And so people work with a lot of attention to every detail, a commitment to excellence that makes it safe, or as safe as possible for everybody to fly. And this is an example of a team that is behind a simulation. A simulation day in the space station mock-ups in Houston will involve at least this many people, if not more. So again, it's a pretty long training program. We talked about it, 2.5 years. It involves a lot of traveling between Houston, Moscow, a little bit in Europe, a little bit in Canada, a little bit in Japan. But it's pretty cool because the reward, again, is flying to space with a wonderful crew. And see something like this from space, or enjoy the view from the Earth, the view of the Earth from the cupola. So I would like to depart from you with a few words of best wishes. First of all, I think you're very fortunate kids, not only because you're here at Space Camp today, but because probably if you're here and you're interested in space, you've already found a passion in life, and passion is really something that can make the difference. If you find something that you're passionate about and you follow that path, for me, is the key to being happy in life. And so if you do have a passion for space, please hold on to that passion. Make it your path in life. We need people with dedication and talent and energy in the space program. And if some of you, as I hope, also wish to become astronauts one day, then I wish you all the best on that path. It's a wonderful journey. And I hope that maybe in 15, 20 years, I will greet some of you as my colleagues. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Oh.
What does the
What is the longest time a person can stay in space?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't think we have quite found out yet. There's a Russian who has already stayed in space for over a year consecutive. There is another Russian, Sergei Krikalev, who's been overall in space for over 800 days. So that makes it, roughly 2.5 years, but in different flights, not consecutive. But we're becoming more and more interested in this. And so actually, when I will be on station after a few months, myself and my crew, we will be joined by the next crew coming up. And out of those 3 people, 2 are going to stay on board of the space station for a whole year. So right now, crews only stay on board for about 6 months. And those 2 people are going to stay for a whole year. And this is going to be a planned rotation. So what happened in the past when the crew members stayed for 1 year, it's because there was a problem with the Russian space program. This time we want those people to stay on board for 12 months, and we want to observe what happens with their body and their psyche, because the thought is to push the envelope a little bit and see how long people can stay in space staying healthy. Because obviously, if we, for example, want to go to Mars, we have to, deal with people traveling for a longer time than just 6 months.
In that airplane thing that y'all were talking about that goes up and down like that, how does it make it where you can float around?
The parabolic flight. Let's see how that works. That they're going to teach you in school, for example, if I just take a stone and I throw it, it's going to kind of, I throw it going up a little bit. It's going to go up, it's going to make sort of a parabola like this shape, and then go down. So imagine you're on this plane, and the plane around you is making exactly that parabola. So you're on the plane goes up, and you're inside the plane. And it's like the plane is throwing you, right? Just like I'm throwing the stone, the plane is throwing me inside the plane itself. And then after it's done that, the plane itself flies exactly that same parabola around me. It's like if I'm launching the stone, and at the same time I take a small airplane and I fly around that stone. And I'm kind of following it. And so the stone inside the plane is not falling. I mean, in a way, we're all falling, but we're all falling at the same time. So, we're weightless inside that plane. We're going to float around. Does that answer your question a little bit? It's not so easy. You need to think about it a little bit.
How do you keep the oxygen in the space station?
Okay. We have a little bit of two things. In part, we generate. Where are you? I lost you. Hey. Oh, there you are. You moved. A little bit, we generate oxygen. We have an oxygen generation system that takes water, and from water it separates into hydrogen and oxygen, and from that we have sort of a constant supply of oxygen into the station atmosphere. It's also true that we're not completely able to supply all the oxygen we need with that system, so we also have oxygen brought on board. For example, the Progress and the European cargo vehicle, the ATV, they all can bring new oxygen supply on board in tanks, like high-pressure tanks, and then if needed, we can release it in the atmosphere of the space station. But mostly, that is kind of to supply little losses, but for the most part, we are able to have like a closed loop.
Are you worried about getting space madness?
Space what? Oh, space madness. Okay. No, not really. I mean, it hasn't happened to anybody up to now, so I hope not to be the first. Yeah. But the space station is actually pretty big. I mean, you don't have to think about it as being small. Okay, the Soyuz vehicle, the one that I told you is like being in a small car for 2 days. Yes, that is pretty small. But that's only, it used to be 2 days, and now probably we're going to just go over to this 6 hours thing, so it's actually pretty short. But the space station itself, have you seen like the people floating in there? It's pretty big. So, and it's true, you're confined in there. It's not like you can say, I'm going to go for a walk if you're upset about something. But, we're all people that are also sort of trained and prepared to deal with being isolated for a while. And we also have special training to learn how to get along with each other, how to solve conflicts in a positive way in case conflicts do arise, to communicate in a positive way, so that all helps a lot.
All right, that was the last question we have time for today. Please help me again say thank you to Samantha Cristoforetti.